Welcome to the Modernize.Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community.
Hello and welcome to the Modernize or Die CFML News Edition. Today is March 22nd, 2022. I am Eric Peterson and I'm joined by Dan Card. Hey Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Great to have you along.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Ortus Solutions, who makes this podcast possible, the makers of ColdBox, ContentBox, ForgeBox, TestBox, and all your favorite boxes. You can say thank you and give back to Ortus Solutions in a few ways. You can like and subscribe to these videos on YouTube, or subscribe in your podcast app of choice and leave us a review. We are still pushing GitHub stars, so if you use any of our packages, go ahead and go to GitHub and add a star there, or there's a fancy ContentBox GitHub ContentBox command that will star all of the repos that have a GitHub attached to it in your project based on your box.json. CFCasts releases free and paid content each week. You can sign up for an account there. And we have Ortus's 102 ColdBox quick tips and tricks over on Gumroad. Finally, we want to thank our awesome Patreon supporters who support us directly, providing close to 96% of the funding for this podcast and our other open source initiatives. We will tell you more about those beautiful, generous people at the end of this podcast.
They really are a good-looking bunch. Have you ever seen the pictures? I mean, stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, you can go check out the pictures on our site at ortussolutions.com/sponsors. I shouldn't have done that off the cuff, but it's something like that.
Although that was just a good way to kind of get you to the Ortus site. Go look around. There's all kinds of cool stuff there too.
Yeah, but we'll put that in. So
sounds good. All right, moving on to news and events.
Yes, let's do it.
Right. Sounds good. The highlight, obviously, at least as far as we're concerned, into the box 2022. The call for papers is now open. We'll talk more about the conference. It's going to about dates and conference times and everything else. It is, but the quick thing is, it's going to be September 27th through 30th. It is going to be in Houston. It is going to be in real life. I guess online is real life, but this is in person. But the submission closes at midnight on April 17th. So you have about 3-4 weeks. Get that in. Think of something great, or think of something that you just think is cool. Don't do market research. Just if you think something's cool, throw it out there, because you never know who's going to follow along with you. That'd be cool. And we're putting the links up in the chat right now, I believe.
Yeah, that reminds me of my first Into the Box. It was 2015, I think, and I had just filled out the box with like 8 topics that that I had anything written for it, but just I thought they were cool and would be fun to talk about, and Ortus selected 2 of them, and I had to get writing and
exactly.
But
there is such thing as the shotgun method, kind of like, I got 8 things, let's just throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
We promise not to make you speak on all 8 if you submit 8, yes. Nolan. But yeah, go ahead and put in things that you don't even have a talk for, but you're interested in learning about. To me, that's one of the best ways to make it happen. So,
exactly.
Next, Lucee has another release candidate in the 5.3.9 series. This is release candidate 3. This should be the last one before they go stable at next week. So go ahead and fire that up. Do some testing. I know we found a lot of needed fixes in release candidate 2, so don't think you can just skip it and everything will be good. Let's catch them now. So we will put the link to the blog post that also has a list of tickets that they fixed from release candidate 2.
By the way, going back, one thing about the call for papers, but also for the release candidate, asking people to go ahead and test and everything else. I know that a lot of times people look at the podcast and they say, "Oh, that's for like the really upper echelon people that really kind of know all this really underground stuff." Don't sell your. This is all in all seriousness. Don't sell yourself short. The reason why I'm saying this is because about 2 years ago, I threw up something. I threw up something. That's disgusting. On modules, I actually put something up on ForgeBox that I just thought was this dumb little thing that nobody would interested. And literally 2 days later, or I think it was like a day later, Eric happened to and be Eric came on and said, "Hey, that's pretty cool. I want to roll into ColdBox." I was stunned. So you never know what little thing that you're going to throw together will contribute to the community that we're all a part of. So just want to kind of throw that out there as just a reminder and encouragement. Don't worry if it's cool or great or anything else. Just throw it out there and see what happens.
Do you remember what module that was?
I do. It had to do with it was the env files. I had something where you can kind of compare it to the master or something or to the example, and then write to it. And I actually thought it was a joke at first when you reached out.
Awesome. That's way cool.
Anyway, random stuff. Okay, so going on, we have a new repo up on GitHub. The common question, we all have run into this. We have it's basically one of the themes of one of the major podcasts for Cold Fusion is CFAlive. What did Mark Twain say? Rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. Same thing with Cold Fusion. It's real, it's vital, it's alive. And we've started, or Ortus has started, basically a new repo to kind of figure out, all right, who's using it. It's a community repo, and the whole idea is to kind of showcase companies that are using Cold Fusion, that are using not just Ortus tech, but Cold Fusion in general, Lucee, and all kinds of things. It is a self-reporting, so obviously don't report somebody else's. That's their decision to put it up there or not. And all the fields are optional. But go to the link that Eric just put in there, and it just basically, you can list basically, you use your company and doing this, just to kind of throw it out there, and so that people do have kind of like a reference to say people are using this for real. And here you go. Cool. Speaking of the CFAlive podcast, moving on to the next thing, I told Eric I would take this one because it highlights him, basically. Coming up, it is CFAlive 111. Now, is this coming up, Eric, or did this already happen?
This has been released, yes. It's
been released already. Okay, so Eric's talking about CFCasts behind the scenes with host Michaela Light. And go check it out. One of the Ortus community talking, basically they're talking about one of the things that we have. CFCast, if you don't know about it, it's kind of our online training center where you can go and watch videos and trainings, things for old conferences, webinars, things that are coming up, things that are past. There's hundreds of videos in there, so it's worth seeing. And so is this.
It was really neat, and I was grateful for the opportunity to talk with Michaela and to get it to her audience because. Most of the people who listen to this podcast, about CFCasts. We talk about it every week. But there's a lot of people who don't know about it and probably don't know where to go look for, like Premier Cold Fusion specific training. So I was grateful to be able to talk about that. For those of you on the podcast, you might be interested to hear some of the how we built it, behind the scenes kind of stuff, our tech stack there. So there's something for everybody there.
True that.
Okay. Over on the Ortus community, we had a couple of posts we wanted to highlight. First up, I put up one, a proposal for a new module that I'm nicknaming CBQ, just the letters, CBQ, because I thought that was clever and funny. But this is a proposal for a provider-based queuing system for ColdBox. So ColdBox has recently, in ColdBox 6, gotten access to that async engine in the background, and that's just kind of opened my mind to all these possibilities. And in working with a client, we wanted a way to send messages, specifically notifications, but delay them. And we found a way to do it with our message queue, and I couldn't help but think this would be really cool if this was standardized, so that if I wanted to throw this in a database or in Redis or Rabbit or some other message queue, that we can make that work. So I put up a proposal. We've gotten some feedback already, but we'd love to get any of your feedbacks, especially if you have dealt with any of these queuing systems, working jobs in the background, things like that. But we're going to be fleshing this out, hopefully at our next little Ortus retreat. Get something out there and start working on this module. I think this would be a huge jump forward for ColdBox in helping all of our applications push to the background all the different tasks that we can, and keeping track of them, retries, all that stuff.
Now, is this basically? Now, I'm just curious. Is the whole idea behind the messaging thing? This isn't requests coming into the API. Obviously, this is like internal. Like the app is talking to itself, or is it ingesting other APIs, and it's kind of
the idea of message queues is you have three players. You have the app that sends the message, you have the queue itself, and then you have some other app or the same app that listens and responds. It's all asynchronous, and it can be worked. You can have tons of workers. You can have lots of people putting things into the queue, and it gives you a way to scale each of those up, but also do things in the background. So, for me, the easiest example is when I send an email. Say we want to register a user and we want to send the email to confirm that they own that email address. We don't want to make them wait the couple seconds it will take for our mail to get sent, whether it's ourselves or to an API. So we can just throw that in a job, throw it on a background thread, and let that happen, and return the user and let them be on their way using the site. So our site is snappy, and all that mail can happen in the background.
Gotcha.
The queuing part here, so you can already do most of that with ColdBox. Get an async request and do that. The queue part here gives you a way to track those jobs, make sure that they're working. If they're failing, you can handle kind of the failure cases, whether that's trying again in a little bit, backing off and trying later, dealing with rate limiting, things like that. So, and having a place to look for these failed jobs, whereas a lot of the times in async work, it kind of disappears into the ether.
Yeah, the whole like the fire and forget is fine, but fire and completely lose track of is not necessarily the best.
And it also has should have built-in ways to say these different queues should be worked at different priority levels, or I can have 6 workers working on this high priority queue, but only 2 working on background tasks.
Cool.
Another great option is reports. I need to generate this report for a client. It takes a minute to do. Well, I throw that in the background task, and when it's done, I can send them an email. Things like that. So,
Cool.
yeah. So if you have opinions or just want to read what we're thinking of, check out that link.
Oh, I have opinions.
The opinions
Oh,
on the queuing stuff.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
The next one we want to highlight is over in the community. We have talked about ContentBox 5.1 being released. So you can check out the post there, and you can jump over to the docs and see what's new from 5 and how to upgrade. Lots of tickets closed on this one, improvements and bug fixes. So go ahead and check that out. And there was a teaser that the docs are getting a massive update. So I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Cool. Very cool. Are you going to say any more about about what the update looks like, or is it just kind of a in process and we'll talk about it later?
Yeah, I don't have any information there.
So this really is.
So it's just a teaser.
All right. Well, I cool. All right. So speaking of CFCasts coming up, we have an Ortus webinar coming up on March 25th, which is today's Tuesday. It's Friday.
Yep.
Okay, Friday at 11 o'clock Central. That's 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific, and some other time in Europe if you're over there. You can do the math. All right. So the idea here is basically how do you put packages together to be used in ForgeBox? Now, if you're thinking that, well, I'm not going to release something, I don't have an idea for a tool for everybody else, it is actually amazing what ForgeBox can do for your code. Now, what I mean by that is it helps you think a little bit differently. Some of us think that we have like this massive app, which we do, but even that app can be broken down into smaller pieces. And with private repos and with both with private repos and with enterprise repos, you can start moving this big monolith app that you might have into smaller chunks. Okay, which is good, easier to maintain, easier to test, but also easier to kind of assign control over to different people. And also, it means that if you have a part of it, a part of your app that works, you can kind of compartmentalize it and say, good, I can forget about it right now because I know it works. And you're not worried about something else breaking it. Another good news for TestBox. But Gavin Pickin is going to be doing a whole thing on how to actually do that. What's the ForgeBoxification of your code? You can do it with any CFML app you have. It doesn't have to be a ColdBox app or anything boxy. And then we'll talk about how to actually do it from there. That is on Friday, this Friday at 11 o'clock Central and 9 Eastern. I'm just being very Eastern-centric right now because I'm in Boston, so that's what we do. All right. Sorry.
There's a podcast I listen to that they're all on the East Coast, and they always call it the one true time zone.
The one true time. I wouldn't go that far for myself anyway, but it is kind of important. I'm just being very selfish, really, is what it is. All right, the next podcast we have this Friday is with Gavin on ForgeBoxiciation. Coming up in April, on April 29th, our very own Eric Peterson. Okay, over here. Did I get that right? Is that the right direction? Anyway, it is on cbSecurity. It's actually that way. Sorry, I pointed the wrong direction. Okay, there you go. Ortus webinar is on cbSecurity. So basically kind of putting together and upping the security on your ColdBox sites. It involves passwords, tokens, and they're not called JWTs. Evidently, they're JWTs, which I think is kind of weird because there's no O in there whatsoever. But JWTs with Eric, that's the title. cbSecurity, passwords, tokens, and JWTs/JWTs with Eric Peterson. That's on April 29th, and it is at 11 o'clock Eastern, and again 12 o'clock. I'm sorry, excuse me. 11 o'clock Central. Wow, I'm just converting way ahead of myself. 11 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific, and for our European friends, some other time that is later in the day for us. Okay.
You just skipped right over my time zone. Gosh. 10
Oh,
o'clock
yeah,
Mountain.
I do forget that happens sometimes. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. Everybody flies over us, too.
Well, actually, I've driven through it many times. It's gorgeous. I'm actually going to be in Utah sometime, I think in June or something like that for a couple of days.
Oh, you'll have to come say hi.
I was going to say we definitely will. Nice. Okay.
I was going to make a joke with the JWTs or JWTs. You can call them whatever you want as long as you don't call them JWT tokens, because then you just said JSON Web Token.
Exactly. It's like Mount Kilimanjaro. If you're in Africa, Kilimanjaro actually means something mountain. So you're like Mount Jaro or something like that. You know, just call it by name. You know.
Good times. All right, we have a few more events coming up.
Just up here at the podcast.
First off, happy birthday, Docker! The end of the month, March 31st, from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific, is joining Docker's 9th birthday. Talk all things Docker with the staff, share and learn about other things too. So if Docker is your cup of tea, go ahead and check that out, March 31st. The Hawaii Cold Fusion User Group has a upcoming presentation, moving your legacy Cold Fusion application to modern CFML with Mark Takata. That is March 24th, which I believe is Thursday. Yes, at 4 p.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Hawaii, 6 p.m. Eastern. Choose your other time in between.
7 p.m. Eastern. 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock Central.
Oh, was it 7? Oh, whoop. I added my 2 hours because that's what I'm used to.
And because we always seem to fly over mountain time, 5 o'clock Mountain. Didn't want to leave that out of there. Pretty much for all of this, if we're throwing the times way too fast, go look at the website. Go look at the URLs they're putting in the chat. They're probably much more reliable when it comes to dates and times than we are.
Yeah, right. we make sure the show notes have the times with the time zone on there, so you can go ahead and convert that later. So check out the show notes.
And just to tie in thoughts together, after you go to Mark Takata's thing on the 24th, then you're primed and ready for the ForgeBoxiciation one with Gavin the next day. You see, it all kind of goes together. Not planned, but it all kind of goes together.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Well, Mark, speaking of him, is pulling double duty on the 24th because before his Hawaii CFUG meeting, he has one Adobe Workshop, Cold Fusion Standard versus Enterprise, March 24th at 10 a.m. Pacific. So he's got a double duty that day. There is a slew of Adobe Workshops coming up. We'll give you a couple and then send you to the website for more. These are all free, all online right now. There is a Cold Fusion workshop on March 30th, 9 a.m. Eastern with Brian Sappy. And then on Thursday, April 21st at 9 a.m. Central European Time, there is an Adobe Cold Fusion workshop with Damian Bruindonks. So we're just going to put a link to Adobe's event page because they got a lot more than that. We just aren't going to read you into May. So, but you can check it out. Check out the one that works for you and hit up one of these trainings that Adobe's putting on, these workshops. Speaking of conferences, I think that's what we're moving into now.
Okay. Yep, sounds good. All right, coming up on March 31st, the end of this month, there's the Docker Community All Hands Conference. It says, join us in celebrating Docker's 9th birthday at our next Community All Hands meeting. This virtual event is a unique opportunity for the community to come together with Docker staff to learn, share, and collaborate about all things Docker. Not to keep going back on this, but the whole idea of packaging and everything else is kind of a theme. Obviously, Docker is all about packaging your servers. It ties in very well. I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep coming back to this, because all this content's related. One of the steps in actually deploying your app to Docker might actually be using ForgeBox. This really actually all does come together. May 10th is DockerCon, okay, the free online virtual conference. It's being billed as a free immersive online experience, complete with Docker product demos, breakout sessions, deep technical sessions from Docker, and our partners, Docker experts. Docker captains, why do they separate out their partners and Docker experts? Do you think that they'd be kind of the same? Anyway, whatever. Docker captains are community and luminaries from across the industry and much more. Sign up to pre-register for DockerCon 2022 at docker.com/DockerCon.
Oof, that's a tongue twister.
That is, it's kind of hard. Docker.com/DockerCon.
I'm excited to see their "You don't know enough about Docker, come watch this track" be announced. One thing about Docker worth mentioning: if you use a Mac, they just have an update that has a new virtual file system. It's hidden behind an experiment flag, but I think they mentioned it like decreased file usage by like 90%. So if you've been needing more performance out of Docker on your Mac, which is all of us because it's never great, that could help. Especially if you do, how did I say it? I see it said, if you do lots of file system access or anything Node.js. Since if you've ever looked at Node modules, everyone jokes about it, but it really is just tens of thousands of files all being required.
Exactly. And that's just to put text on the screen.
That's crazy. Right? All right, enough joking about that.
No, never mind. All right, coming up, April 12th through 14th, so coming up in a couple weeks, we have DevNexus 2022. This is the largest Java conference in the U.S. It is coming out, I said Atlanta, basically the 12th through 14th. The link is actually in the chat. We also have some Ortus representation right there. Brad and Lucee are both speaking. Lucee is speaking on Alpine.js. The title is Alpine.js, Declare and React with Simplicity. Alpine.js is that don't know it, obviously, is a JavaScript library that does a combination of kind of, it's interesting. Basically, it's kind of a mixture of server-side compiling of HTML that gets served up to the front. Is that something?
Nope, that one's CBWire.
That's CBWire, which uses Alpine. So I thought maybe Alpine was related, so I guess not.
Yeah, Alpine, I like thinking of it as the new Vue. Like, Vue was like, hey, this is simple data binding, and then it went into components and kind of lives there. And I still love Vue, don't get me wrong. But Alpine's the, like, no, you just wanted data binding. We're like the updated jQuery. And so That's kind of what Alpine does.
All right.
We'll see how long they stay there before they try to become what Vue currently is. And Vue becomes React, and React becomes Angular, and the circle is complete.
Oh, no, React should never become Angular. Sorry, that was a knee-jerk reaction there. I love React. I don't. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, love Angular. Anyway, that's just personal animus there. I apologize. So, not to be outdone, Brad is also speaking. What is a pull request? Contributing to open source, kind of getting people to build into the community. Not trying to get people build into the community, but if you ever thought about it, they get an idea or found a bug and you wanted to fix it, check this out. What is a pull request and how do you contribute to it?
Yeah, my favorite thing with that one for Brad always says he's infiltrating the Java conferences to bring up Cold Fusion. They never choose his Cold Fusion talks, but then they choose one like this, and he'll show all Cold Fusion code contributing.
Right.
So, good job, Brad. Fighting the fight.
Nice.
All right. Speaking of Vue.js, the Vue.js Conf, US Conf is coming up June 8th through 10th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Beach, Code, and Vue. There's a workshop day on June 8th and the conference on June 9th and 10th. I don't know if any Ortus people are officially going, but I know they want to go. So we'll see how that works out. And we talked about Into the Box. So just to remind you, this is September 27th through 30th. That is 2 days of workshops followed by a 2-day conference. Our call for speakers is live, as well as a little landing page for the conference. It doesn't really have much, but you can register to know when you can come buy a ticket. There will be early bird pricing, especially for people coming to the full 4 days. We are super excited to see you there. I love Into the Box. It's the best. A few more coming up. There's some tentative dates for Into the Box Latam, which is December 1st and 2nd of this year. And we are eager and waiting to hear any news about CF Camp or CF Summit. If that is not enough conferences for you, comps.tech's got you covered. In fact, do we have Into the Box up there? If not, I'm going to go add it. It is not. Okay.
Well, Eric does that. Quick thing, for those of you that are not that don't know what Into the Box Latam is for Latin America. All right, so we actually have conference. It's based in El Salvador, right? In San Salvador.
Yep.
Okay. And all the content I'm Spanish speaking, and that content does get up on CFCasts. So we do have multilingual content there. And as Eric mentioned, December 1st and 2nd. I did not know what Latam was for the longest time until then I realized what it was, and I kind of felt stupid. So I figured I would share with our community in case they did not know. Would bring them into the circle. Yeah. Okay, going into blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. We got a couple things. One, from a little while ago, I guess this is March 18th, 4 days ago, James Moberg put up a script basically to convert, and I don't know if there's a fancy way to say this or not, but HEIC images. HEIC, is that what it is? HEIC images. Okay, so be careful you don't put JOTs in your HEIC, and then you have all kinds of JPEG issues and what you've got. Anyway, I just made that up. It made no sense. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Again, for those of you that did not know this, because I'm not a Mac person, I use PC and Google and stuff. HEIC images, HEIC images, are our default image. They come from the motion picture experts group. They're used a lot on Apple products and stuff. They're basically meant to be like JPEGs, but they're much more compressed. And so what James Moberg did, he basically put a script up there where he uses image magic. There's a Cold Fusion front end using image magic to convert HEIC to JPEGs, which is kind of cool. And
yeah, you'll probably run into this if you do use any Apple products where you try to upload a photo from your iPhone and the site's like, what? That's not a photo. What are you trying? You're trying to trick me? So this helps if you need to do that. If you get HEIC images, which you will, if you have anybody coming from an iPhone, which is a big percent, you'll need to do something like this.
There's all kinds of really interesting extensions. If you haven't looked recently, was it JFIF? Is that was one that I think it's used a lot? And then now all of a sudden I'm blanking. JF was what that I hadn't really seen before. And then what is the one that Amazon uses? It's like a JPEG, but it's like a WebP or something.
Yeah, WebP is like the open source one, I believe, or maybe that's the Google one. But yeah, that's a web photo. Yep, Google. It's Google.
Okay. Web photo, got it. WP, gotcha.
It's a much more straightforward name than HEIC and Heath.
HEIC, exactly. What the HEIC is that? All right.
All right. Another tweet coming up here from Zach Spitzer. He said, only recently found out about contract path in Lucee. It's the reverse of expand path. I thought that was interesting because that was the first I had heard about it. Also, I keep pronouncing it in my head contract path, just when I read it, because that's what I think of first. But no, it's contract, actually, like expand and contract.
The same thing. I'm like, what kind of contract? It sounds like a messaging thing. Like, how are we gonna have? Yeah.
So yeah, expand path, makes it the full expansion with mappings and all that. Contract path will do the opposite. So, don't know if I'll ever need it, but it's nice to know. Today I learned.
Well, it's good to know. I mean, basically, you're right. We go one direction. So it takes the absolute path and makes it relative to the folder you're in. Is that right?
I believe it's relative to the web root. Like it replaces mappings. Where expand path expands mappings out, this takes mappings and puts them back to the alias.
Oh, very cool. Oh, I might have to think for that.
Oh, there you go.
It's a very educational podcast for me, anyway. This is great. All right.
Okay. Then we have a blog post / video because Ortus celebrated 15 years of ColdBox this last week. So ColdBox obviously is like the granddaddy of all the things that we do here at Ortus. Maybe it's a grandpa now. I don't know what the pedigree chart looks like here. If Ortus is just a father or a grandpa or what. Anyway, we are just so excited and grateful it was created 15 years ago and that it is going strong today and everybody using it. So go ahead and check out that video and that blog post over on the Ortus website.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, it actually, it's funny. That's one of those tools where I didn't use it for the longest time, and then I started, and I was like, oh, and I was regretting the number of time that I actually did not use it because I'm like, I would just give myself hours and hours of headaches, not just work, hours of headaches. Work would be more than that. All right. Would that be our blog section without a bunch of things from Ben Nadal?
Yeah,
So
our Ben corner. We need a graphic for the Ben corner.
We do need to have like a video that comes up, kind of like a section on the Tonight Show where it's like, hey, here's our game. This is the Ben corner. Ben says, and when Ben says, people listen. All right. So this basically what this blog post is about: compare and compare no case. And he's talking about how those two methods now can actually accept null values. And he goes on basically how he did this journey to kind of figure it out. And basically this is getting more detail about why that's important and everything else. Now his next, and I'm not jumping over that one a little bit, but I think the headline kind of covers it, but definitely go check out the content. But the next one I thought was fascinating because I've heard Brad talk about this, but I didn't really know what he was talking about until I saw this, and I was like, oh, I got it. So a couple of years ago, maybe about a year ago, I discovered, because I'm a little bit behind the times or got caught up, the ternary operator in code. So all of a sudden, it kind of revolutionized how I was writing code. A lot less if-then statements and everything else. It was nice and clean and everything else. Well, one of those really, what I call them, fancy shortcuts anyhow, is called the Elvis operator. And the whole idea is to basically check to see if a value is null or is not null. Does it exist? Is defined? Is it null? And all those different things that Cold Fusion has to see if a variable actually exists. Well, the Elvis operator is shorthand to make that happen. Basically, it's a question mark and then a colon, and it's called the Elvis one because it looks like he has like an Elvis quaff with the question mark and that kind of stuff. Quaff, is that the right word, or is it a drink?
I don't know.
Haircut. I don't know. Anyway, what he's talking about, though, this is actually pretty important. Not actually pretty important, like I'm surprised, but it's pretty important because the Elvis operator works differently on Lucee as it does in Adobe Cold Fusion. All right. And in Adobe Cold Fusion, it actually works more similarly. This is part of the content, works more similarly to the ternary operator than it does as the Elvis operator, where in Lucee, it actually works like a true Elvis operator. But the details in there were really interesting. So if you're writing code or transitioning code from one to the other, this would be a great thing to actually check out because that could be one of those gotchas that you don't really think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That one has bit us in ColdBox. When we dropped, I believe it was 11 Cold Fusion 11 support, we were super excited to use the Elvis operator and did. And then over the course of the next few months with bug reports, took all of it out because it doesn't work consistently between the two. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're ever not quite sure what it does, actually, Scott in the chat basically is quoting Brad. Brad says that the Elvis operator eats any non-valid return, just like a big jelly donut. Just gets rid of the non-valid return and then kind of moves on and puts a default value in behind it, which is good. Good way to remember it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. We got two more Ben blog posts to wrap it up. The first one comes on the coattails of some downtime Ben had. He had some issues with a MySQL upgrade, the MySQL 8, and his blog was offline for, I think he said, about 8 hours. And so he wanted to create like a health check alert to let him know, right? And he went about it using netlify cron functions, which is I believe they're serverless functions that you can schedule on a basis. Postmark and of course Cold Fusion. So made a health check page that did just like a very simple database query to make sure that the database could be connected to. That was the issue. And then calls that on a schedule and sends himself an email if it doesn't work. Because guess what? Sending yourself an email still works great, even in 2022, to let you know when there's problems. So it doesn't have to be a Slack message.
What? If it goes to Slack, and then I can have, oh yeah, never mind. Go ahead. Yes, it is true. When all else fails, all you need to get is the message.
Yep. So yeah, check that out for how he made that work. Obviously, there's more than one way to do this, but this is a great way if you need to add something like that to your application. I know we have specifically the first thing he talked about, building a health check page in RCF applications. We like to build a page that connects to all the different services. Like, hey, I can connect to the Couchbase cluster. I can hit all the databases I need to operate, and I can, return a good response. So try to exercise everything, but do it quick. Okay, and rounding it out. Speaking of MySQL 8, Ben was playing around with the MySQL 8 document store and dev API in Lucee. So, MySQL 8 has a ton of new features if there's any of you hanging around on the MySQL 5 series. And one of them here is document store, which is basically JSON columns and being able to store them and query against stored JSON, which is crazy. Oh, wow. It's this weird mix of SQL, NoSQL. I'm so used to, like, if I need JSON in a SQL database, it's just stored in there, and I got to pull it out if I want to look into it. But MySQL 8, other ones like Postgres, and I know later versions of SQL Server, you can all do a query where you say, I expect this nested JSON property, to equal something, to be greater than. It's pretty crazy. So Ben plays around with it. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but if you're interested in JSON columns in MySQL 8, go ahead and check out his blog post.
So just to clear, and I don't know if you know this or not, but John Farr had a great question in the chat. She says JSON records or JSON columns. And so basically, it's JSON that's stored in a column, like in a record, or in a field on a record, right? And then you can actually query that JSON. That's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What is, and again, this is it's sort of off topics related, but isn't there like a built-in like JSON query language now in CommandBox? Like you can actually like just. This is one of those things I remember Brad talking about. I haven't used it yet.
Oh yeah, I think you're referring to the GMES path, or it's usually known as JQ because that's the biggest.
That's what it is.
Implementer.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a way to write a path string that can dig down into a JSON document. Yeah, that was Brad and Scott Steinbeck did a lot of work on that one. So.
Oh, cool. And so the idea behind this on MySQL is the idea that something similar like that it happens. It's actually querying a database, but the JSON in the database. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Just ideas connecting.
All right. Let's talk about jobs. Find a job. There was one new job listed this week on getcfmljobs.com. It was a senior web application developer in Reston, Virginia. We will add that link to the show notes. Other job places you can check out: Ortus' own website, ortussolutions.com/aboutus/careers, Everett Community College, and the Consortium. All those are available in the show notes. Go ahead and check them out if you are in need of employment.
Just one thing on that too. It's one new job. There are other jobs that are posted on there.
Yes.
57 cold fusion positions in 34 companies and across 32 locations in 5 countries. So other things with numbers. Go check it out.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about our ForgeBox module of the week.
I'm still pasting. Okay, the ForgeBox module of the week, PDF Box by Matthew Clemente. Now, excuse me. Actually, it's funny. I rented this just recently. In fact, I was looking at this and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." Now, the Adobe Cold Fusion implementation of all the PDF functions is obviously built in, is native, and everything else. And now Lucee more and more is getting on to having a lot of the functions built in. Also, what Matt Clemente has done, he's actually added a ForgeBox module, and it's meant to be different PDF pieces, okay, that are generally faster than the CFML built-in functions, and has more fine-grained control. Okay, so the idea here, and it actually, I was checking this before we started, it does work on both the Adobe Cold Fusion and on Lucee, which is one of the things that I thought was kind of cool, because there's some things that Lucee's implemented most of the stuff on there, not all of it, so I was kind of looking through and seeing what different things on there were. But this looks really, really pretty neat, and Matt does really good stuff, so this is definitely worth checking out.
Awesome.
I just need a whole different monitor to read it better, and then the monitor turned off. Good. Okay.
And on to our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. We are going to highlight an oldie but a goodie. This is the VS Code test box extension. And the reason I wanted to put it in is I just remembered how amazing this little feature is. Jump to spec. It's only one feature of the entire extension, but when you open a ColdBox spec, you can invoke this, or I bind it to a keyboard shortcut, and then type in the text of the spec, and it will take you right there in your file. So no more like Command F around. It can do fuzzy searching, just like when you're trying to find a method in the file. Much nicer than just find in the file. So that's only one thing. It also has snippets that will help you easily generate, like the describe, the it blocks, given, when, then, any of those. So check that out, VS Code test box.
Cool.
Well, we've reached the end of the podcast today, and that means we want to tell you about those beautiful, generous Patreon supporters. Those are my 2 adjectives I'm sticking to today. So these are individuals personally supporting our open source libraries like CommandBox, ForgeBox, ColdBox, and TestBox, and supporting this podcast, helping us to produce this and get you the latest news in the CFML community. You can support us yourself on patreon.com/Ortus Solutions. There's some wonderful perks available to those who subscribe on the bronze package, and the bronze package and up will get a ForgeBox Pro and a CFCast subscription for the duration of their Patreon subscription. And all the Patreon supporters have a nifty badge on our community website, as well as a private forum that they can discuss in and chat with us Ortus people. You can check that out again at patreon.com/Ortus Solutions. If you pay for an annual membership, you'll save 10% for the year. And now comes the time that we love to read the names of all of these beautiful, generous Patreon supporters.
Exactly. In all seriousness, these guys are great, and I've met a lot of them. They actually are pretty cool. So if you want to be part of this illustrious group, go ahead and sponsor. All right, so special thank you to John Wilson of Synaptrix, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Mario Rodriguez, Giancarlo Gomez, David Bellinger, Dan Card, Jonathan Perret. Is it Perret or Perret? Perret, right? Okay.
Sure. Jonathan, reach out to us. We'll put a note in.
Gotcha. And Jonathan, thank you. However you say your last name, you're awesome. All right, Jeffrey McGee from Sunstar Media 6, Dean Motter, Joseph Lamore, Don Bellamy, Jan Yannick, Lakshma Tijahade, Carl von Stetten, Jeremy Adams, Didier Lesnicki, Matthew Clemente, Daniel Garcia, Scott Steinbeck from Agri Tracking Systems, Ben Nadell, Brett DeLine, Kai Koenig, I apologize, Charlie Earhart, Jonas Erickson, Jason Dager, Sean Oden, Matthew Darby, Ross Phillips, Edgardo Cabezas, I love him, Patrick Flynn, Stephanie Monge, John Wish, Kevin Wright, and Peter Amiri. That was meant to include that I don't love everybody else. Just Edgardo's pretty cool. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. You can see an updated list of all of our sponsors on the Ortus Solutions website, and that is at ortussolutions.com for the website, and then /about-us/sponsors. And you actually see the name they were trying to find before. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Card.
And I'm Eric Peterson. We'll catch you next week.
Good.
Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.Modernize.They.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.